Beruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Yud Beis Amud Aleph, starting with Daf Yud Aleph Amud Beis, 8 lines from the bottom from the new Gemara. The Gemara asks right away on the Mishnah Kiman, who is this Mishnah like? After all, the Mishnah says to be Machshir and Mavui. According to Beis Shammai, you need both a Lechi and a Kara. According to Beis Hillel, you need either a Lechi or a Kara. Yet it states the loy kechanani v'lo kitanakama. Davavam and Aleph, when explained to be machshir a mavui mafulash, the Tanakama said you need to have a tzuras haPesach on one side, and you need to have a lechi or a kara on the other side. According to Hanani, explained according to Beis Shammai, you would need a delis on both sides, or according to Beis Hillel, you need a delis on one side and a lechi or kara on the other side. So who is our Mishnah going like? Omrav Yehuda Hachi Ka'omar. This is what the Mishnah means to say. Hechsher Mavui Sasum Ketzad. Our Mishnah is discussing a Mavui that is Sasum, that is closed on 3 ends. The Gemara over there in Davavam and I was talking about Mavui Mafulash, that's open on 2 ends of the Rishus HaRabim. So our Mishnah states, in regards to a Mavui Sasum, that's only open to 1 end in the Rishus HaRabim, how do you machshir that? Beis Shammai Omrim Lechi V'Kareh. Ubeis Hillel oimrim oy lechi oy kara. Says the Gemara, Beis Shammai oimrim lechi v'kara lememra de kosavrei Beis Shammai arba mechitzois deraisa. The fact that Beis Shammai requires a lechi and a kara, does that mean to imply that he wants to be soisem that 4th wall in order to make it a 4th wall, so that a person would be considered to be a Rishus hayachi midiaraisa? Says Gemara loy, it could be not. Lizrog misholosh huda mechayiv. If you threw from the Rishus harabim into the mavui with the 3 walls, you would be chayiv midiaraisa for hachnasa, according to chatos. Letaltil adiika arba. But to metaltil within the mavui itself, the chacham were more machmir, and therefore you need to have, according to Beis Shammai, a lechi and a kara to then matir such a tiltul. Says the Gemara, weiter Beis Hillel oimrim oy lechi oy kara. Leima kosaver Beis Hillel shalosh mechizah deraisa. The Gemara is suggesting that if Beis Hillel says that a lechi or kara would be sufficient on the opened end, then let us say that Beis Hillel holds that 3 mechitzos are deraisa. Says the Gemara loy, it could be lizrog mishtayim huda mechayiv. Even if you were to throw from the Rishus hayachi, from the Rishus HaRabim rather, into the mavui, if it had 2 mechitzas, if it was, that would also be sufficient as a Rishus hayachi to mechayiv. Letaltil al deika shalosh. But to metaltil, then you would require 3, and therefore the ilechi or the kara would just be sufficient just to metaltil within those 3 walls. Says the Gemara weiter, quoting our Mishnah that Rabbi Eliezer says, lechayoyin. So the Gemara wants to know, what does that mean? In other words, Rabbi Eliezer is coming to argue on the Tanakama's understanding of Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai, according to Tanakama, says you need a lechi and a kara. Rabbi Eliezer says you need lechayoyin. So what does he mean to say? Iboiluhu. Rabbi Eliezer lechayoyin v'kara ka'omar. Did he mean 2 lechis and a kara? Or dilma lechayoyin beloy kara kamar. You meant 2 lechis without a kara. Toshma, let's bring the following proof. Ma'aseh Rabbi Eliezer sheholach eitza Rabbi Yosi ben prei de talmidoi lo oivlin. He went to visit his talmid, Rabbi Yosi ben Preda, in the area called Oivlin, on top of Yud Beis Amud Aleph. Umatzu sheyoshev b'mavui she'ein lo ela lechi echad. He saw that his talmid was sitting with only 1 lechi. Omar loy, Rabbi Eliezer said to his talmid, Beni, asay lechi acher, make another lechi for the other side. Omar loy, the talmid asked, V'chi lesoisem anitzori, do I need to close this open side? Omar lei, yisosem, umar bekach, close it. And what if it? Meaning to close it? Yes, you should close it. Omar, the Brisa continues on and says, Omar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel lo nechlechlu Beis Shammai Beis Hillel al mavui shehu pachois me-4 amos she'eino tzorech klum. In a mavui that's less than 4 amos, says Shimon Gamliel, then you don't need to make any tikkun according to everybody. What are they arguing? Al rochav me'arba amos v'ad eser. When it has the width of daled amos until yud amos, that's their machlokes. Shebashama oimrim lechi v'kare, ubeis hillel oimrim oy lechi oy kare. That's the end of the brisa. The Gemara now, for our purposes, discusses the first part of the brisa. Ketani mihas. It taught nonetheless. V'chilesoismoi ani tzorich. It said when Eliezer went to visit his Talmud, he saw there was only one lechi. He told his Talmud to then make another lechi, to which the Talmud asked him, do I need to then close this open end of the mavui? If you want to say that he meant, when he said lechayoyin, he meant the lechayoyin, 2 lechis plus a kare, then mishum hochi amar v'chilesois manitzorich. For that we understand now where the Talmud said, do I need to then enclose the open end? In other words, you're instructing me to make another lechi plus the kara. Eli amris lechayoyin beloy kara, my lesoismai. But if it just means just to add another lechi, how is that closing the open end? The Gemara answers, hachi kamar, you have no proof that it means 2 lechis with the kara. It could even mean just 2 lechis. And this is what he said. Do I need to close the open end of the mavui with 2 lechis? And therefore we have no proof one way or the other. Omar Mar. The Gemara now brings back the second part of this brayso that was just quoted. Omar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel lo nechleku beisham beis Hillel al mavui shepochos me'arba amos she'eno tzorich klum. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel makes a statement here in the brayso that if it's less than Daled Amos is the width of the open end of the mavui, then you do not have to then make any correction. But our Mishnah quotes a Talmud that's in the name of Rabbi Yishmael in front of Rabbi Akiva, who was a Talmud really of Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, and he stated the following halacha in the name of Rabbi Yishmael in front of Rabbi Akiva. Lo nechleku beishamai beisila al mavui shehu pachos me'arba amos shehu niter oy bolechi ubekara. That everybody agrees, including beishamai, that you only need a lechi or a kara. Mean to say, certainly you have to do something, but to leave it without any correction whatsoever, certainly not. Rav Ashi hochi kama. Rav Ashi explained, this is what Rabbi Shimon Gamliel meant to say here in this brayso. You do not require a lechi and kara like Beis Shammai normally does require. And you do not require 2 lechis like Rabbi Eliezer. Elo, or lechi, or kara Beis Hillel. Or a lechi or a kara like Beis Hillel. In other words, that's what it means, lo klum. No klum in the sense that you don't need the classical tikkun that Beis Shammai normally requires. A lechi and a kara, or what Eliezer requires in the name of Beis Shammai, 2 lechiyoin. Rather, you need either a lechi or a kara, like the Talmud of Rabbi Shmuel stayed in front of Rabbi Akiva. Now, ask the Gemara V'Kama, how much can you say is the width where you would still require a tikkun on that open end of the mavui? Omer of Achli v'Item Rabbi Yechiel ad arba. And still 4 tfachim, you would still need a tikkun. Less than 4 tfachim, no tikkun is necessary. Omar Rav Sheishes, Omar Rabbi Yirmiyahu bar Abba, Omar Rav. Moidim chachamim leRabbi Eliezer bepasei chatzir. The Gemara now turns its attention to chatzir. Until now we're discussing mavui, the fixing the tikkun of being machshir a mavui for tiltul. Now the Gemara is focusing now on the chatzir. What is required to be machshir the chatzir for tiltul if it has an open end? Moidim chachamim leRabbi Eliezer. Chachamim agreed to Rabbi Eliezer in the case of chatzir bepasei chatzir that you need 2 lechayoin for a chatzir. In other words, even though the chachamim argue with Rabbi Eliezer in regards to mavui, that the chachamim say that it's enough just to have 1 lechi, whereas Rabbi Eliezer says you require 2 lechayoin. But in regards to chatzir, chachamim do agree with Rabbi Eliezer. Rav Nachman Omar halacha Rabbi Eliezer pasei chotzer. Rav Nachman said the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer in regards to pasei chotzer, meaning that he's implying that the halacha is that you require two lechayoin, but he does not understand that the chachamim are in agreement with Rabbi Eliezer in regards to chotzer. The same way that they argue with Rabbi Eliezer in regards to mavui and require only one lechi, so too they will argue with Rabbi Eliezer in regards to a chotzer that you only need one lechi. Omar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok man moedim. Who is this that we said that chacham are moedim to Rabbi Eliezer in regards to chotzer? Rebbe. It's Rebbe. Like the Gemara will bring a brayso to then support this shortly. Halacha mechlal de pligi. The fact that Rav Nachman bar Yitzchok said the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer's mashma that there's a machlokes. Man poligales. Who is the one who's arguing on Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbanan. The Tanya, the word now brings the following brayso. Chotzer niteres bepas echod. The Tana Kama says over here, the Chomim, that one pas, one lechi is sufficient to be machshir a chotzer. Rabbi oimer b'shnei pasim, whereas Rabbi says you need two pasim, two lechioim. Omar Rabbi Asi, Omar Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara now says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan in regard to them being machshir the chotzer. Chotzer tzricha shnei pasim. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you would require two lechioim to be machshir pas, to machshir a chotzer, just like we saw in the name of Rabbi Eliezer. Omar le Rav Zera. Rabbi Asi. Rabbi Zera then turned to Rabbi Asi and he said, Mi Omar Rabbi Yochanan Hochi. Who said that Rabbi Yochanan holds that you require two, that he requires two lechioin for a hechsher chotzer? V'ho atu da amris mishmid Rabbi Yochanan. You yourself said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, pas chotzer, pas a chotzer tzrichin sheyeh bohen dalid. Rabbi Yochanan requires, you said in his name, that to be machshir the chotzer, you need a pas of dalid tfochim. V'chitema arba mikan va'arba mikan. If you're going to say that means 4 tfochim on each side to resolve that which Rabbi Yochanan said before in his name, at least just implying that he said it requires 2 lechioin, so therefore it would mean 4 on each side. V'hatani Rav Ade bar Avi mikamed Rav Chanino. Ve'amrei lo kamed Rabbi Chanina bar Papi. Ketana be'eser ugdoila ba'achadesrei. This is a Mishnah that we saw quoted before, that if you have a small, meaning a more narrow chotzer, that opens up to a bigger, wider chotzer, where the smaller, narrow chotzer has a dimension of eser amos, and it opens up to a more wide chotzer that has 11 amos, whereby there's going to be a half an amma on each side that is going to be opened up to the chotzer gedola, which means it's 3 tfachim and 3 tfachim. So the Gemara is asking, that doesn't fit to Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan, you're saying, requires 4 tfachim. And even if you want to say that it's not exactly in the middle, then it'll be 4 tfachim and 2 tfachim, and you just said that he requires 2 lechioin. Kisodik Rabbi Zera miyamei, when Rabbi Zera came out of the water, of the sea, Pirsha, he explained, Beruach achaz be'arba, to mimachshir chotzer from one ruach, then 4 tfachim, a pas is sufficient. Mishtei ruchos, mashu lekan, mashu lekan. But from 2 directions, you would require a mashu of a lechi on one end and a mashu on the other. V'hadetani ad bar avimi, Rebbe the Sover like Rebbe Yosi. And he explained that this is indeed the shita of Rebbe, who requires 2 lechioin to be mater a chotzer, who holds like Rebbe Yosi, which we saw earlier on Daf Yudam and Aleph, that each one has to have a minimum of 3 tfachim for each lechi. Says Gemara Vayter, Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. This time in the name of Shmuel, chotzer niteres bepas echad. He said in the name of Shmuel that a chotzer is niteres with 1 pas, with 1 lechi. Omar le'abai le'Rav Yosef. Rabbi now challenges what Rav Yosef just said in the name of Shmuel, that 1 lechi is sufficient to be machshir the chotzer. Mi Omar Shmuel Hachi, did Shmuel really say this? That one lechi is sufficient? V'ho Omar le Shmuel Rav Chananya bar Shiloi at loy ta'avid uvda eli iberoiv doifen oy b'shnei pasin. He said, do not rule a halacha matter in this regard unless you want to masher with a majority of the wall to close the majority of the wall, or two pasin, one on each side. So how can you tell me, name of Shmuel, that one pass is sufficient? Here it clearly says two pasin or the majority of the wall. Omale. So Rav Yosef answers back, Ana lo yadana, I don't know, but I will tell you the following. There was a Maisa that took place in the kfar, in the dwelling of where the shepherds lived. There was the yam that broke into a chotzer. There was a chotzer, a four-walled chotzer, and their yam breached the wall going into the chotzer. So now you only had three walls with the yam, which is a karmelis, then going into a chotzer. Ve'osa lakamed Rav Yehuda ve'lo itzrechalei elapas echad. And the shaila came before Rav Yehuda what to do in order to be matir the taking of the water that is now in the chotzer and bringing it, let's say, into the home. Can go ahead and metaltil in that chotzer with the water that was coming from the karmelis. And Rav Yehuda said, you just need one pas. One pas would be sufficient to go ahead and metaltil. So Rav Yehuda was a Talmud of Shmuel. So he says, Rav Yosef, that this Maisa took place, and the Talmud of Shmuel, paskin that you only need one lechi. So it implies that Shmuel also required only one lechi. Omale. So he turned back to Rav Yosef and he said, Loshon yam ka'amris. You're talking about where the yam came into the chotzer. Kalhu shehekelu chachamim b'mayim. But that's a special kula that the chachamim made when it comes to drawing water, bringing water. So that's why they said it's sufficient to have just one lechi. As we see also, similarly in the case of Rav Tavla, who said before Rav, who asked Rav, mechitza tluya mau. If you have a mechitza that is talui in the air, that's not going down to the ground, that's not within 3 tfachim of the ground, mau, what's the din? Shetatir bechurba. In other words, a churva, a ruin, has walls that are not all the way down to the ground, that are tluya, that are in the air. And you want to know, can you metaltil within these walls? After all, is it like a din of a reshus hayachi to metaltil within these walls? Or Malay, Rav responded, Ein mechitza tluya materes ele b'mayim. When do we matir a mechitza tluya? That's when it goes to water. The chachamim were mekil in regards to water. Here's referring to a case that the Mishnah later on, the 8th parak, discusses. If a person has a balcony, and that balcony, which is of course against the wall of his home, is over the yam. Can he draw water from the yam into his home via the hole in the balcony? So of course he cannot, because the yam is a karmelis and he wants to draw it into a reshus hayachid. However, the Mishnah goes on to say that if he then constructs 4 walls of asar tfachim, the width of dalid al dalid tfachim, in other words, he creates a reshus hayachid, even those are going to be mechitzas tluyos, because those walls are around either his balcony or around the hole in the middle of the balcony that's at least 4 tfachim wide. Those walls that are mechitzas tluya, we say good achis mechitzos. They are as if they're going down to the yam, and he's able to then draw forth water into the hole of his balcony, because it's as if he's now bringing it from the shus hayachid, which is now the water, through the balcony, which is all one shus hayachid. So when do we make our makel like that in regards to mayim? So you have no proof that you can see that Shmuel said one lechi to be machshir the case of mayim, because mayim is a kula. Mikol Mokum Kasha, the Gemara says, nevertheless, we have a Kasha within Shmuel itself, because at first we said the name of Shmuel, that one lechi indeed is sufficient. On the other hand, we saw that he says either the majority of a wall that's closing up the wall, the majority of that wall, or a pass of Daled Tfochim. Ki also Rav Papa, Rav Huna, Bered, Rav Yoshua, Mibei Rav, when they returned from the Beis Medrash of Rav, Pirshuha, they explained, Meruach achas be'arbo. If it's from one ruach, then a pass of 4 tefachim is sufficient. Mishtei ruchos mashu lekan or mashu lekan. Whereas when he said shtei ruchos, when he said 2 pasim, then he was talking about 2 ruchos. So therefore, that would miyashev Shmuel, because if Shmuel said it's sufficient to have either a pass of Dalid, or we quoted Shmuel as saying, he said 1 pass, or we saw that Shmuel said either Rov Doifen or Shnei Pasim. So we're answering that if it's 1 Ruach, then 1 pass of Dalid is necessary. If it's 2 Rochos, then even a Mashu, Mikan Mashu Lekan. Says the Gemara Vaiter, Amar Papa Ikashali. However, if it's difficult to me, the Yishuv of Shmuel, the following is going to be the difficulty. Chokashali. The Omar le Shmuel the Rav Chananya ben Shilo, because Shmuel himself said to Rav Chananya ben Shilo, At loy ta'avid uvda, don't paskin halacha lamaisa ella iberoiv doifen or b'shnei pasin. Either if it's going to be closing the majority of the wall, or if it's 2 pasin. So ask Rav Papa, lama li roiv doifen, why would I need the majority of a wall? Bepas arba sagi. If a pas arba, that should be sufficient. And after all, we said pas arba is enough according to Shmuel. So why does he say over here that you would have either a majority of a wall, or you would need to have a pas of arba? Or shnei pasim, or majority of wall. Pas arba should be enough. Why do you need a majority of a wall? If you'll say, what does it mean, the majority of the wall? B'doifen shiva, a wall of 7 tfachim, the ba'arbo havalei roiv doifen, whereby 4 would be greater than the majority of that wall. So lama li arbo b'shloisha mashu sagi. Why do I need 4? 3 and a little bit would be enough, because if the wall is 7 tfachim, a little bit more than 3 would make it a little bit less than 4, which wouldn't have a requirement to have any more of a correction. Like we saw earlier, only until arba tfachim needs a correction, but less than arba tfachim you don't need to make any correction. So then, if you have three tfachim in mashu, that's enough. Why does he say 4 tfachim? Answers the Gemara: Ibois emo kan bechatzer kan moy. That which we just said that you don't need a correction less than arba tfachim, that's talking about a mavui. But chatzer, we're saying, is more stringent, whereby you would need, yes, a correction even with less than arba tfachim. V'bois emo. Alternatively, you can say the Rav achloi gufei tanoi. This statement of achloi that said less than arba tfachim, true, it's talking about also a chatzer, but it's a machlokis tanoim, whether you need a correction or not. According to Rav achloi, he's according to the Tam that says you do not need to make a correction if it's less than arba tfachim. However, there's another Tam that does require a correction. The Gemara now brings another brayso, Tanu Rabbanon, Loshoin Yam Hanichnas L'Chotzer, Ein Memalin Heimenu B'Shabbos, Elim Ken Yesh Loi Mechitza Gavoya Asora Tfachim. Here it states another case where you had the Yam that goes into a Chotzer. Here, the breach into the Chotzer doesn't breach the entire wall, but there's a little bit left over on the sides of the wall, and the water goes through into the Chotzer. So we said, of course, the water, the yam, is a karmelis, and the chotzer is a rishus hayochid. So here we have a problem. We need to make a tikkun. So the tikkun, it says here, is with a mechitza gavoya asar tfachim. When is this true? Now here it means that the pirza was more than eser amos, even though it says asara, which is mashma usually in feminine to be tfachim. Here refers to when the pirza is greater than asar tfachim, that the water goes into the chatzir. So we no longer have a wall. The wall was more than asar tfachim, is no longer considered to be a pesach, and therefore you have to build a mechitza gavoya of asar tfachim to then be machshir this chatzir. Aval asar here again it means eser, but if you have a pirza of only 10 amos from this yam into the chatzir, then ain't sar klum, because then you have a regular pesach. And since we said the ends of the wall, it's like 2 lechim, so it's okay. The Gemara is medayik that you cannot draw water from the chatzir without a tikkun, if it's indeed going to be such a situation. Aha metaltil, but you could mashma go ahead and metaltil. Why should you be able to metaltil? You said that it's more than eser amos. If it's more than eser amos, so not only should you not be able to then draw water, but you should also not be able to metaltil. Answers the Gemara in Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis at the very top. Here we're talking about where you have the remnants of the wall underneath the water that are still going to be a valid wall, in regards to then making it so that over here you can go ahead and still metaltil. But since those are not valid walls to go ahead and enable drawing water, that you need to construct a mechitza of asara tfachim high.